There's a world you're living in. No one else has your part. All God's children in the wind. Take it in and blow hard. Neil Young's song, There's a World, is a key inspiration for our ongoing series of heartfelt conversations with folks from all walks of life. We're diving in and exploring their practice, their process, and how they express their unique genius to help create a more compassionate, wise, and present world. This is your part. Welcome back to Language of the Soul, conversations on healing and growth. I'm Ben Umstead.
And I'm Martin Perkins.
And our guest today is Diane Umstead. Diane is an early childhood development educator, advocate, and community leader. Her 40-year mission to create accessible and equitable childcare and pre-K programs, develop foundational resources for parents, and radicalize teacher training with an emphasis on empathy and nurturing has not only placed Diane at the regional, state, and national levels of education, but at the heart of the social justice movement in the United States. Welcome to the podcast, Mom.
Hello, hello. Mucho gusto to your listeners, and thanks for having me.
So, Diane, we have a friendship that spans back nearly 30 years, and what resonates as the word to describe who you are when it comes to within the early childhood arena is genius. Most people want to use that word expert, and expert has always felt so hierarchical to me. And genius speaks to the inner journey, right? It speaks to who we inherently are and how we share that gift. When my daughter Luna was very young and experiencing developmental issues, I'll always be grateful for your sharing of, hey, maybe Luna needs to be tested. Hey, maybe she needs support in a different way than she is getting. From a speech development perspective, it was this profound shift for Luna, and I'll forever be grateful. But it really speaks to, after 40 plus years of work in this arena, the expertise is there, but I need not label you an expert as much as I want to share that to our audience, that you're being given the gift of a conversation with a human being who has fully immersed herself in an arena and has been an advocate for young children for decades in a way that is rarely seen in the world. So thank you for your work. And as you stand here in your first year, right? You're in your first year of retirement. What does that feel like to know that, wow, 40 years of experience and hard, wonderful work? What does it feel like to know that that's kind of in the rearview mirror?
I would characterize it as shifting, because this passion and this purpose can't be shut off just because I decided not to go to work every day in the same way that I did for 46 years. First, thank you for acknowledging my genius, because there were times in my career and in my life where I didn't feel that I was doing anything, super special, or that I even didn't know what I was doing. But I can't necessarily pinpoint a time when I went, oh, I do know what I'm doing. And I am a genius, even though I didn't use those words. But there are countless stories from families and individuals and teachers like yours, Marty, where because I made it my life's purpose to understand what was going on for kids, from an entire societal standpoint, because just because there's a child, you can't separate them from the family, you can't separate them from the community. So my life's work settled in and was rewarded with those kinds of stories where I knew that the underlying advocacy that was going on was truly making a difference. And so I'll just go back to the shift or the transition. Ben, you said in my introduction that I'm a community leader. So when I see an opening for what I know, for my genius, or a connection in community that I seem to have a lot of, then I just use that in my everyday life, because I still come in contact with parents and with families and with individuals who have concerns for their kids. So there's this interconnection that has gone on throughout my life, grounded in my belief that everyone should have access to these systems in early childhood and in education, but also everyone needs an advocate to be able to tap into those things. So this 46 years can't be shut off and won't be shut off, because underlying is that I'm an advocate and seeking justice and seeking what people need and can benefit from, so that they have opportunity in their lives.
In speaking into that word advocate, being an advocate for others often means, how do we be an advocate for ourselves? So I'm curious, how did that balance work for you through the years? When do you think you did it well? When do you think it kind of fell off the rails? What were the things you might have done to kind of refine where your needs met and how you met your needs in the midst of being an advocate for others?
I grew up in a family of service and of faith, even though that has changed for me, the faith part, but the need for some type of grounding as I do the work doesn't come easily for me. It never has come easily for me. And while I have to practice and begin and start over, and with the things that I know that ground me and that bring me to a place where I can be a better advocate. So one of the things that is great about being an extrovert, I will say that, is that other people lift me up. I constantly seek conversation with friends and other advocates to just help me with my own self-care and with compassion for myself. So here's an example. I guess it was Saturday night, I was out walking, and that's one of my compassionate actions, is walking. I love walking outside. I love walking in the woods. I like walking with a podcast in my ears or with just listening to sounds of nature. But I was walking and I was like, I just haven't seen anybody lately. And I know that changes my cortisol levels, and it helps me to feel more connected and gives me more energy. So let's see who might be up for an impromptu visit. And so I contacted a friend, and and we had a couple-hour conversation yesterday at a coffee shop, and it was really great. So thinking about that strategy too, as an extrovert, I have to put people around me, whether I'm reaching out to care for them or asking for them to care for me. That's one of the things that I do. The other piece that brings me like so much joy, and I've been doing it since I was a kid, I would bring books to the dinner table because I was reading a good story, daggone it. And so my parents would be like, you have to put the book away. And I would always wonder why I had to put the book away. So now it's just such a pleasure to just like lay around and read a book. And I'm reading a lot more now that I'm retired. But even when I was working, I tried to keep a regular reading schedule. And that was mostly on the weekends and maybe at night before I went to bed. But that also fills me up. It's mostly fiction. and could be historical fiction, but it's sometimes nonfiction as well. I've gone in and out of a quote unquote meditation practice or mindfulness practice. I don't have that except when I'm walking. Like it's hard for me to sit still, although I did practice yoga and meditation off and on in my life. Um, so I just think there's a lot of different ways. And for people like me who, you know, my initials are DU. And so sometimes people make fun of that. They're like, oh yeah, do, because I'm always doing or seemingly always doing.
Back in 2012, you got some training in digital storytelling, and I'm just wondering, what's the story you tell about yourself now that you might not have been able to tell, not because of experience, but because of the way in which you know yourself here at this stage of life?
That's a good question. Because so much of my life was the work that I did, but that work felt like play to me. And that's one of the things that we work with teachers on is that work is play for kids. And so it was really hard for me to separate those two things. I really enjoyed all those things that I did from the local level to the regional to the national level with families one-on-one, with families in groups, with teachers. I really, really enjoyed that. And so I I can't I don't want to separate myself from that because it's still too early in a way. And I don't exactly know what it looks like to separate myself from that still. Um, I'll tell a quick story. Like within the first month of my retirement, I was pulled into a group of people who were trying to help a mother whose apartment had burned and she lost everything in her apartment. And so we were trying to just help her get some basics. And so, of course, I'm reaching out to all my different network friends and we got the basics. We got the diapers for the 2-year-old. We, did what we could do. But even after I dropped off some of the basics that I had collected, I was just like, but we could do more. So who can do that? Oh, I know people. I'm retired. I could do that. I have time. And so, I've stuck with this family, sort of helping her navigate the system. And I didn't like plan to do that. No one asked me to do that, but I did ask her if it would be helpful. And so we've stuck together now for the whole entire 7 months since I've been retired to just work on what she might be needing and how to best connect her with that. So I think I'm looking for those kind of opportunities to still make an impact. They may be more individually related and may be more spontaneous. So everybody who knows me knows that I'm a planner and I use the planning tools that I have in my community organizing as a volunteer with specific issues, not necessarily just children and families, but I'm starting to I think I'm being more open to like what comes to me, what is in front of me that I don't have to plan for, but I want to engage and I want to use what I know and the time that I have. So hopefully I answered that. I kind of went around a little bit.
No, it's a great answer. And as you speak, what I'm very aware of is number one, as you were speaking, I'm very aware of well, Luna and I just started watching a TV show called Abbott Elementary.
Oh, I love that one. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, so it's for the audience out there, it's set at an elementary school. It's a sitcom centered around the relationships that the teachers have with amongst themselves, as well as with the students and their community to some degree, and how that all kind of plays out. And they are often playing up the challenge that comes with limited resources. And two things that you brought up just now was just limited resources, which I suspect in the area of early childhood work is probably always the case. It always feels like you're dealing with that. And then, secondly, you spoke at the end of your last sharing around simplification. Like you've learned rather than, big plan, like plan with what's right in front of you, right? So there's some degree of what I would describe as a practice in presence within what you're describing. And I guess I want to really speak to that because I know that, you know, as you enter into this new phase, there's on a personal level, resources will have need to be managed personally that way, but also how you relate to the world is also about sort of making use of what you have and being, employing a sign of simplicity to it all. So I was just curious how that's showing up in your life.
So there isn't a day that goes by where I sometimes have this underlying itch. And I definitely embrace simplicity. And I remember, when we were living at Quinania Farms, that was one of the goals of all of us who lived in that particular community, to live more simply. And I feel like I've placed those tenets in my life around simplicity. And at the same time, there's an itch, and I don't know if the itch is, I'm still exploring that actually. And I'm like, is this itch just like being a little hyper, or is it coming down from being so hyper vigilant? When you've managed programs for hundreds of children and or in the community as an executive director, you're just constantly, beating the drum for the cause. And I think that suited me well in my work life. Now I don't know exactly what I want to do differently that's more simple. But to your point about presence, when my parents were both in their journey to death of their human bodies, that because that's happened in the last 5 years for me, and I was present, and I remember writing, because I wrote during my mom's death. Pretty much every day I wrote something, and I actually put it out there on an online platform that we were all using. But I remember writing something about how that experience was forcing me to be present to what was going on, to her death, to her journey. And so there's a part of me that wants to try to tap into that again without forcing it. I've noticed that I like going on my back porch in the morning and just listening to the birds and sort of settling in with that. And sometimes I'll just read my news out there, or I'll just extend the time if it's not too hot and just keep reading one of my books. Um, but I have still a bit of restlessness. And so I don't know if I want to program that though, because the other day I was like, should I go join a gym? What should I do? Should I, and I was like, no, you like walking, just go walking. And so it is still evolving, whatever this is, but the tenets of simplicity are still there. And it's a matter of embracing them as they come, and saying that's good. It's okay to be this way now.
Right. As you're speaking, I'm reminded so keenly of the advice I got as a young person, the advice I gave my own children, the advice I given my own students over and over and over again in the midst of what you're describing as your restlessness, which is encouraging you and everyone else who experiences that restlessness. I would describe it on some level, it's a version of it, or it can express itself a lot of ways. One of those ways is boredom, right? Per se boredom, but boredom isn't always per se being bored. It's often, it's a betwixt and between state. It's a place we go quite necessarily so that we have the space in between whatever has just ended and whatever may begin anew again in a different way. And this restlessness I would offer is, some of it might be per se letting go of what was, and part of it's giving you the space to be, so that whatever comes next has been allowed to have the spaciousness it needs, the cooking time, so that you really know, and that what comes next has, it carries with it your inherent genius in the way that it need have, you know?
I do. And actually, I'm kind of excited about it because this this focus on just me or just me and my family, because that's a reality too. I am married. So in some ways I could see myself like wanting to push against it, but setting my hands down and saying, no, this is what's happening. That's being present. And how do you want to be in it? And so I'm like, oh, well, I could be this way. I could try that. I could be, it is, maybe it's not a persona, but maybe it is. I don't know. I'm like, well, how do you want to be in this? And so there's a form of curiosity that surfaces, and there's also a form of excitement that surfaces because I might be learning something new about myself, about the world, about the other person, about whatever resources are needed, those sorts of things.
Yeah. And, as well, you're also in that interesting and universal phase, at least for many, that universal phase of having over the last several years experienced the loss of both parents and what that means to us as human beings. Because it does profoundly affect us, right?
Yeah, I'm not like overly sentimental about it, but I sometimes think, well, I haven't talked to mom about this or whatever, or even dad, and what would mom and dad say, and about what's going on in the world or about what I'm dealing with, and my mom used to always say, I think she borrowed a phrase from some newscaster or something, where she would say something about, don't forget to take care of yourself or and each other or something like that. When we were leaving, she would always say that. And so, that touches me. And I remember that, at pretty much every single day because, things come into my life and my existence that I've never had to deal with before. One of the things that's happened in our family is that when we moved here 7 years ago, to Newport News, Virginia, to come back and be a part of the team to help take care of my mom and dad, which has been my extreme privilege. And I also was lucky to have a job where they, allowed me to take extended time so I could be with them. But my husband had an unexpected open heart surgery. And it was not only difficult just to know what to do at the time because I was on a business travel trip and had to get back, but also then what the fallout was from that. So I think anytime you've had that kind of a major surgery, uh, it just affects every part of you, not just physically. And so we have been, dealing with or living with, he has been living with a change in his brain. And I have had to, I guess you could say, take over like pretty much all the things in the household. And I did that while he was experiencing those changes and while I was working and while I was caring for my parents. And So now it settled in and things were kind of okay. But now every time he has any kind of procedure that involves anesthesia, he has another brain change. And so, again, looking for my resources, but also trying to figure out how to care for myself. And it's interesting because I'm capable and I can do what I need to do to manage this household. And I have also been the recipient of resources from my family's assets, which is great. But it's all very new and it changes every day. And so the first thing I do is I look for other people who've experienced it, again, because I'm an extrovert, and reach out and say, tell me how you handled this, tell me what happened here, or um, like, where do you go to talk to somebody when you're feeling this way? So like I put those resources around me so that I can hopefully do better in giving him the support that he needs. And every day is different. And so that's also a part of this simplicity, but it's also a part of being present and going, okay, you may not have all these answers yet, but here you are. And so now what? And it's not necessarily a thing, when I say now what, it's not necessarily a thing about what I would do, although some of it is, but it's how do you want to be with this?
Hi, everyone. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please consider visiting martinperkins.com for more healing and growth resources.
In Language of the Soul, I offer to my community, I focus a great deal around helping human beings find their unique expression of self-knowledge. In each of us, there's a unique genius that's ours and ours only. My calling, my expression as a teacher is about helping my students find that unique genius within themselves. In my herbal practice, I have been inspired to synthesize a number of approaches in order to serve my clients. At the core is cultivating a healthy microbiome. We begin there. We gather a depth of knowledge, body, mind, and spirit, so that herbal approaches can be offered in the needed order to address the present symptoms while also treating the root causes.
As burgeoning podcasters, the greatest gift you can offer Martin and I is to share this podcast with just one person. Word of mouth remains the most genuine way to share the art and media that you love and care about. So in advance, we thank you. And now, back to the conversation.
So you all have been married now 46 years. And I know that given, as you described it, your husband's brain changes, it means often that you're sometimes dealing with new past personality traits, new qualities and how he interacts with the world. So on some level, all this breadth of work that you've done as in the realm of early education, there seems to be parallels there, right? How do you keep your heart at least open to the possibility of what's happening rather than kind of going into fixing the problem?
I mean, the first thing that I think of when I think about what I'm doing with and for Joseph is that it is a form of advocacy. And while I don't know what that's going to look like on any given day, that is like an extremely concrete embedded value of mine. So I don't know how to relate that to my heart though, Marty. I'm not sure.
I guess what I'm really saying is there are moments when you can both love and like Joseph, and there are moments when you can love him and he can infuriate you.
Well, you just said it.
Right, right. But I'm describing it. I'm not necessarily describing the practice because I know for a fact that you don't stay infuriated with him. So what is that practice? Because it's not unlike the practice that we might have with a, a toddler or a 4-year-old, right? And I'm not saying that Joseph is a child. I'm saying some of the same universal qualities of the interaction are there. How do you find that in yourself after 46 years?
Again, I don't know if this is a heart answer. So that might be hard. That might be harder for me. I do relate it to development and to early childhood development. Like I have talked with teachers and families over the years about adapting, and I find that I have to adapt myself instead of expect something differently from him. And I would just be clear, but every day is different. So I don't know how I'm going to react. But the bottom line is that we committed to each other 46 years ago, no matter what, that we were going to support and love each other. And so that foundation is still there. I don't express it in the same way that he does, and that is partially because of my own first family. But I did see when my parents were at the end stages of their life how that loving relationship that they had, expressed or not, or however expressed, was one of the things that kept them going. And as a child growing up in that family, I didn't know how their love was, growing, but I could see then because they were married on 66 years, I think. In the end, I could really see what that foundation of commitment to each other did for them. And so there's a part of that I think about for me and Joseph too. I just know that we committed to each other and we committed to love each other and to care for each other. And, part of that was because of the way we were raised. So maybe that's just different for other people, but I take the commitment seriously.
Your answer reminds me a bit of an interview I heard many years ago from a woman who had been married 70 years and asked the question, "What's your secret?" And her answer was, "Well, we managed not to fall out of love with each other at the same time." And I hear that quality to some degree. Some days you find your love for Joseph, and sometimes in his own way, he finds it for you. And in that way, that serves as the glue and the reminder of that 46-year-old commitment. And it's a beautiful thing. And, well, frankly, one that I just simply don't have much experience in that realm, right? Although my parents were together 60 years, I never sought the type of marriage they had. So therefore, I didn't really know how even building that would look like. Whereas at least you had models that you could look at and go, there's elements that I want to take from this. There were there were few elements from my parents' marriage that I sought. That said, they were there. In their way, they showed up. And I appreciate your candidness in speaking about this relationship with Joseph, because even though I don't know that you realize it, you did share a heart-centered response. It just may not have necessarily seemed that way to you because you really did speak of a boots to the ground kind of love and open to the degree, like at any moment. The old saying in Chinese medicine is that the role of the heart protector is neither to keep the heart open nor closed, but its gates well oiled. And so there are moments when I'm sure what I hear you describing is I need to fix things, I need to take care of the situation, and other times I find ways to receive Joseph's love. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's good. I like the metaphor and the imagery of the gate too. That's nice.
Yeah. And on some level, you are serving in that role to some degree and have been at different phases throughout your life as caregiver, not just professionally, but as mother, as wife, as well now in varying ways. Do you ever just get really tired of it? And what do you do when you get really tired of this?
I would say rest, rest. So there's nothing wrong with just shutting everything off and taking a nap, daggone it. And, it's interesting to because during the pandemic when I was working from home, I was able to sort of pace myself differently, even though it was a massive drain on people in social services and in the education world. But I could stop and I could take a nap. And so now it's the same sort of thing because I don't have to plan every single thing. I can be less planful. I am just like, nah, I'm gonna take a nap. And no, I just feel like reading my book all day. No, I see I've got a few emails to respond to about whatever event I'm organizing for my volunteer work. But no. And then I guess it's a form of resistance too. I'm gonna just say that, be a little bit radical about that. So this whole rest is a form of resistance because, and I think I'd have to go grab the thing off my wall, but there's a quote that I have on my wall from Audre Lorde, and I see that as a part of everything that I'm doing politically or as a volunteer or as someone who's a change maker and trying to bring about social justice in my community, that is also absolutely necessary. Do I always know when I need to do it? Yes. Do I always listen to myself? No. But I feel like I'm getting better at that because I have less static around me. I can say, you are feeling tired. You don't need to be on the computer right now managing that. And you don't need to be talking to anybody. And you can read your book or you could take a nap. I talk with a group of friends from North Carolina every single week by Zoom, and we are all in this same stage of life where we're like, 69, 70, finally retired, but still living on purpose. And we talk about, well, do you know how to nap? Can you nap? Like we ask each other, like, how long can you nap? Do you set a timer? What do you do? I mean, it's funny because we'd all been executive directors or worked for nonprofits too. And so it's like you don't give yourself the luxury of that. And even the woman that I had coffee and tea with the other day, she was like, my cortisol levels are out off the wall. My doctor's telling me I need to do this. And I was like, have you tried CBD? And we're offering each other these strategies for figuring out how to come down, so to speak, and rest and figure out how to do that because we haven't really done that in our lives, always done it in our lives. But I think we know when we need to do it. It's just,
Will we listen?
yeah, exactly.
And I loved the the turn of phrase, I can be less planful,
Right.
right? I can choose not to fill my life full of the machinations of planning, right? As you were speaking, the first thought that came to mind was that the last episode of the third season of The Bear, in which all these great chefs all receiving a meal on the very last night of the restaurant. And they're all talking. Some of them are actors, and some of them are actual world renowned chefs who are all sitting around talking about what it's like to be utterly and completely consumed in their chosen line of work, which is, serving others through food. And I think of you as someone serving others through your advocacy work for children. And everything you were just saying about resting, about taking naps, about it all echoes what they were all saying in that episode around self-care, of what can at times be the other insanity of being in the midst of an all-consuming project that all of you is invested in, right? And I've borne witness and over the years, not just to you but to others and myself, what that can look like and how we can slow down, how can we can rest so that, as you pointed out earlier in our conversation, there can be joy, there can be play, there can be all of those elements as well.
Yeah, I find myself looking at the calendar going, oh, it's a whole day with nothing.
Yeah.
You don't get, I didn't get to do that before. It was like I would have 7 or 8 meetings scheduled in a day, which is really ridiculous. I was like, oh, I don't like having to get up and go out to some appointment. And why am I still having to schedule things on my calendar? Ugh. But there are still rituals that I do each day too. And I do, like I said, keep a calendar because I've got to organize a lot of things for our family. But still, I'm like, oh, it's a big white blank, on the calendar. That's tomorrow, actually. What will I do?
And it's so interesting that you point it that way because I love those days, if only because whether I, in essence, do nothing or I choose to fill it, I I'm very conscious in my practice to choose to approach those days, really all days, but in particular those days with a sense of joy, whether or not there's something that I'm doing that's per se creative or I'm being restful or relaxed. Regardless of what I'm doing, I'm very intentional with that time because I really believe that it's if I can allow my journey to be filled in that way. I often think of my life as being done in such a way that there's so much restfulness that I don't always necessarily see all the things that I've per se done. And at a recent social gathering, a friend came by and he was like, "Where do you find all the time to do all the things you do?" Because of the way I do it, it doesn't carry that quality. And I think on some level, in some ways, you're describing how you are creating that for yourself.
Martin, you took the opportunity when your daughter Luna was on the podcast to allow me to lead that conversation and share a part of my friendship with Luna, and that creativity and that joy that Luna and I share. And it was so pleasurable today to get to see, 30 years of these two families intermingling through this conversation between you and Diane, my mom. Mom, to hear you talk about the joy and the play, that yes, so much of your work is related through massive, astronomical, sometimes unfathomable systems. And there's almost kind of an irony to the foundations of your work being an advocate for children, having to operate within capitalism and knowing that that ultimately doesn't serve them or anyone. What that aspect signifies, the joy, the play, is foundational values that you, by practice, not by force, but by practice, showed and passed on to myself and passed on to Aaron, is something that I want to publicly, share my gratitude for. So thank you for that because never in our lives growing up or as adults in moments of great challenge did you ever say anything to indicate don't be yourself, walk away, step away from what, who you are? None of that, never. I think you said this to both Aaron and I over 10 years ago. You said, I'm so grateful that neither of you ever stepped into just kind of being like brainwashed. And I'm paraphrasing, but those words were used in that way. And that's not to negate what people are going through and their choices, but it was an acknowledgement of the systems at play and you understanding and knowing them in a really, genius way to say, foundationally, how do we change them? We change them through these places. And the fact that you see that as play, the fact that there is joy, inherent joy in there, is so profound and it's so powerful. And it definitely resonates within me every day.
Well, thanks for saying that, Ben.
It was, a beautiful mother-son moment. I almost felt like a privilege in being here, and I'm hoping the audience as well will feel the same way. So, yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Diane. It's a funny thing. I would suggest that for the bulk of our relationship sort of took a back seat to Joseph and I's, and as Joseph and I's relationship has changed, it's created more space for you and I to connect in ways that are quite lovely. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I know that you're there. Let me just say it like that. We don't have to be in constant communication or even see each other in person because that doesn't happen very often. But because your family has been so integral to mine, it's there. And your presence, even behind the scenes, is one of the things too that keeps me grounded and keeps me going. That's why I really enjoy listening to the podcast as well, because it helps me feel connected to you all.
Language of the Soul, Conversations on Healing and Growth is produced by Ben Umstead and Martin Perkins, with editing and music by Ben Umstead.